Hello. In this video, we're going to be going over inventory cost flow, specifically the last in, first out method, also known as LIFO. As I've discussed in previous videos, but I like to repeat it just in case you don't start, you haven't watched the previous videos or it's been a little while since you watched a different video. The cost flow of inventory is always the beginning inventory plus the net purchases equals your cost of goods available for sale, cost of goods available for sale, that's a subtotal, minus ending inventory equals cost of goods sold. And so when you take your beginning inventory plus net purchases and you get your cost of goods sold, you get a dollar amount. And the way, the purpose of this video and the previous videos is to determine of this dollar amount, right? How much should we, of the inventory that we have on hand, some of it we sell and some of it we don't. So the inventory that we don't sell, we still have left in our ending inventory, and we have to allocate an amount to ending inventory. And we've also sold some inventory. So we have to allocate that amount to cost of goods sold. And there's different methods of doing that. And we're going to discuss today LIFO. We're going to use this same example that I've used in my previous videos. And it's from the Converse company, and it shows just beginning inventory of 4,000 units at $5.50. So total cost is $22,000. And they've made various purchases throughout the year. And each batch of units that they bought has been at a different unit cost. So here's the total cost for each batch. And so their total cost of goods available for sale is $71,500. So they have 11,000 units that are available at a cost of $71,500. And they tell us, the problem tells us that 6,500 units have been sold throughout the year at various times, which means that if we've sold 6,500 of the 11,000 units that we have available for sale, and we've sold 6,500, that means we have 4,500 units remaining in our ending inventory. And we've got to figure out, of the 71,500, how to allocate that cost between those two items. We got to allocate the 71,500 to the inventory that's going to remain at the year end and to the amount that we've sold and expensed through cost of goods sold. There are 3 different ways which companies can calculate their ending inventory and cost of goods sold using certain assumptions as to which units have been sold versus which units have not been sold and remain in ending inventory. There's also a method that you can use that doesn't involve any assumption. That's called specific identification. And if you want to find out more, there's a video posted about that. But these ones all have assumptions, which is why it's just these 3. And each one of these has a video. The first one is the weighted average cost, which takes an average cost of all the units that have been purchased to date. And first in, first out assumes FIFO, assumes that the units that you first acquire are the first ones to be sold and allocated to the cost of goods sold, which means that your inventory usually consists of the items you most recently purchased, usually, not always. And LIFO, which is what we're going to go over today, is last in, first out, and that assumes that the units last acquired are sold first. So the units that a company most recently purchased are the ones to first be allocated to the cost of goods sold number, which typically means that the ending inventory consists of the first units or the older units that are acquired. Usually it means that's a lower ending inventory number than FIFO. So back to our same example that we have all these purchases and amount units sold. First, we're going to look at doing LIFO, last in, first out, using the periodic inventory system. The periodic inventory system is not used by many companies because it is kind of outdated, but also very manual. But in the periodic inventory system, inventory and cost of goods sold are only recorded and computed really at the end of an accounting period, such as the end of the month, quarter, semi-annual, or annually. So let's just take it. So let's just, for this example, we're doing our LIFO calculation at the end of the year. And this is the information that we are given of what occurred during the year. So here's all of our units that we acquired. We acquired 11,000 units, right? We started with 4,000, then we actually purchased on January 17th, we purchased 1,000 units for $6, but we'll discuss why this is broken up. And then we purchased 3,000 units on March 22nd for $7 and 3,000 units on October 15th at $7.50. And that gives us to our total number of units available for sale during the year. The problem tells us that we have 6,500 and have 4,500 remaining in inventory. And so for the units that are sold of the 11,000, last in, first out, LIFO means the most recent purchased inventory, which in our case, the most recent is October 15th, is the first one out, meaning it's the first one to be allocated to cost of goods sold. So we sold 6,500. So of the October 15th purchase that we purchased 3,000, that's going to be allocated. That's the first layer that's going to be allocated to LIFO using the periodic system. So we're going to, of the 6,500, 3,000 is going to be allocated at $7.50 cost. Then the next most recent, last in, first out, is the March 22nd batch that we acquired. And we also acquired 3,000 units at $7. So now we're going to allocate the next 3,000 units to at $7. So if we're told 6,500 units are sold, we've allocated 6,500 using the 1015, and then we've allocated another 3,000 using the March 22nd batch, which leaves us with 500 units remaining to be allocated. And so we just keep moving up to after this batch is used, we use the next most recent batch, which is the January 17th batch. We purchased 1,000, but we only need to allocate cost to 500 remaining units. So on January 17th, we purchased 1,000 units at $6, but 500 units are going to be at $6 are going to be allocated to the cost, leaving 500 of those units from the January 17th batch in the ending inventory. So if you look here, we've allocated all 6,500 units that were sold. We've allocated these costs, and that could be seen here. We can, it's laid out a little bit better. But here, this is from the 1015 batch, from the March 22nd batch, and this is from partially from the January 17th batch for the units sold. So we have our cost of goods sold of $46,500. And the remaining units is right here. We have remaining units, 500 remaining units from the January 17th batch, which was at $6, and our beginning inventory. We have not used up that layer, was 4,000 units at $5.50. And so our ending inventory ends up being $25,000. So just going to erase some of these things just so it's a little, can see a little bit better. But you can see that in LIFO, we start here at the newest batch. Last in, meaning the most recently acquired, is first out. So we kind of go up the chain to allocate those costs. That's how you do it under the periodic method. Now let's talk about the perpetual inventory system method. And the perpetual inventory system method is used by most companies, and those companies update their inventory and cost of goods sold amounts every time they purchase inventory and every time they sell inventory. And they can do that because the technology today makes that a lot easier. You just scan all the items you purchase and scan all the items that you sell. Okay, same example, right? And under the perpetual inventory system, we take it layer by layer. We have to keep track of each batch of acquisitions, and every time we sell units, we have to see what layer, what batch that amount is taken from. So our beginning inventory is 4,000 units at $550, so our beginning inventory is $22,000. The problem tells us that on January 10th, we sold 2,000 units, and we only have one layer. We only have 4,000 units at $550, so we're going to take that cost of $550 and allocate that to cost of goods sold. So of the 4,000 units that we have in our beginning inventory, we sold 2,000, so we have 2,000 units remaining in our ending inventory at $550. So our ending inventory is $11,000 as well. Next, we had on January 17th, we purchased 1,000 units at $6 per unit. So let's include that in our spreadsheet. January 17th, here's our purchases. This is our purchases right here. We purchased 1,000 units at $6 for $6,000. And now let's calculate our ending inventory. Well, this just comes down, right? Because we had 2,000 units at $550 on January 10th. So this is our January 10th layer. And then on January 17th, we purchased another 1,000 units at $6. Our ending inventory is $17,000 on January 17th. Next, we had another purchase on March 22nd, 3,000 units at $7. So March 22nd, 3,000 units at $7. We're just going to keep adding to that. So that's just going to come right down here. This is our March 22nd batch or layer, 3,000 units at 7,000. And we still have these two batches remaining in our ending inventory. So, and these are the dates. We still have our 2,000 units at $550, 1,000 units at $6, and now we just acquired another 3,000 units at $7. So our ending inventory, $38,000. Okay, next we have, oh, we already did this one. Next we have a sale. We sold on April 15th, 1,500 units. So let's see. So here's April 15th, 1,500 units. And in the LIFO is last in, first out, right? You gotta remember that, which means the most recent inventory that we purchased is the first cost we're gonna allocate. So the most recent purchase that we made was right here, was this $3,000 layer on March 22nd, right? It's just like right here. We're gonna, that's our most recent. So our last one in is our first one out. So we acquired 3,000 units on March 22nd, of which now we're gonna allocate 1,500 of those units at $7, right? So that's gonna be our cost of goods sold for those units sold on April 15th. And now when I look at my layers, I have for my 322, my March 22nd, I only, in my ending inventory, I only have 1,500 units left, right? Because I acquired 3,000, I sold 1,500 that allocated from that layer or that batch. So I have 1,500 units remaining at $7. And then the rest of them that I have remaining from January 17th and January 10th that I have still not sold is the assumption. So 2,000 units at $5.50, 1,000 units at $6, 1,500 at $7 gives me ending inventory for $27,500. Next, I had a purchase on October 15th, 3,000 units at $7.50. Let's include that in our spreadsheet. October 15th, purchased 3,000 units, purchased at 750 is 2250. And now let's do all my layers, right? So now this is my most recent layer. My last purchased is 1015. And then I have this one on March 22nd. This is for my January 17th, and this is for my January 10th batch. Those are my layers, and I have an ending inventory of $50,000 as of October 15th. Okay. My last transaction from this example is I had a sale on November 20th for 3,000 units. Okay, let's see how we allocate that cost. So November 20th, 3,000 units, and the question is, well, what amount am I going to allocate to the 3,000? So I'm going to look at my October 15th ending inventory is what I'm going to do, right? And I'm going to look at my layers of what I have. And these are my layers that I know, right? My most recent layer was from my October 15th purchase of 3,000 units. I happen to sell 3,000 units, so I'm going to use that entire layer that I've purchased, at 750. I'm going to do the entire layer to this cost of goods sold on November 20th, right? Because it's last in, first out. So my last layer, basically, or my most recent acquisition is going to be the first one allocated to cost of goods sold. So then I take 3,000 units sold. I'm going to allocate a price to them of 750. So my cost of goods sold for for those units sold is 22,500. And then I have to calculate my ending inventory. Well, since I've used the entire 3,000 units from my October 15th layer, I can just basically, I don't have it anymore, right? So I just bring the rest of these down to my ending inventory. So I still have my January 10th, January 17th, or March 22nd batch remaining in my ending inventory. If I sold more units, let's just say I sold units on December 2nd, then I would start taking the cost would be allocated from my March 22nd batch. My last one in is my first one out. But anyways, we don't have that. That was just in case we did. But my ending inventory here is 27,500. And let's calculate my total cost of goods sold. Where's this? I don't have a color thing. Okay, doesn't matter. My cost of goods sold is going to be this 11,000 plus 10,500 plus, let's just erase all these things so we don't get confused with all our markings, plus the 22,500 gives me cost of goods sold of $44,000. So of my $71,500 that I had cost of goods available for sale, I can now allocate it. 27,500 goes to my ending inventory and 44,000 goes to my cost of goods sold. Let's see if that matches my spreadsheet. 27,500 and 44,000. If you put in from your spreadsheet into this formula, my beginning inventory plus my net purchases equals my cost of goods available for sale minus my ending inventory, that's my formula, it gives me my cost of goods sold. If this doesn't work, if this mathematically does not work, if let's just say your ending inventory is 27,500 and per your spreadsheet, your cost of goods sold is 50,000, but it should be 44, then you know there's something wrong with your spreadsheet. So doing this calculation at the end of any calculation using spreadsheet is always a good check. because it'll tell you if you're off. So now just really quick, a comparison for LIFO, the last in first out, between periodic and perpetual. My total cost of goods available for sale is the same, right? It's the same under each one. It's just how do we allocate it between ending inventory and cost of goods sold. And you can see that they are different. They do not equal. Only in FIFO, only when you use FIFO does the periodic equal the perpetual method. In LIFO, it does not. I just want to make that point, make sure that point comes across.